Welcome to another vintage fishing reels service, and in this case repair video. In today's episode we have a Montgomery Ward's Hawthorne number 60-6403. And you can see the Montgomery Ward's logo from the time period there, and this ends up being a trade reel. So Montgomery Ward's the Hawthorne line was a lot of different reels named Hawthorne were trade reels made by other brands for Montgomery Ward. And this particular one, this one is basically a Johnson reel made by Johnson, and it's essentially a Johnson Sabra 130A, which I believe puts it in the late 1960s time period. I believe there was a 130, a 130A, and a 130B, and the 130A would have been mid to late 60s, probably more late 60s. It appears to be working fine in every way, but you'll notice that the reel foot is broken. And so before I do anything, I'm going to work on seeing if I can come up with a suitable repair for that broken foot. And so I'm going to get to work on that right now. Okay, so I've taken a piece of steel here, and the first thing I did was drilled a couple holes, and this hole went up into where there was enough metal to get up into the shaft there, and then I tapped that one and put in a screw and then filed that off so it didn't stick out past the bottom of this thing. And on this one, because there was no shaft material to screw into and it's so thin, I just drilled a hole and put a rivet in there. And so now I'm going to use a strong 2-part epoxy to sculpt the rest of this and then paint it to color match. And except for that end of the rivet sticking up, you'll never even hardly notice that it was repaired, and it will be very strong and functional. So I'm just going to take 2 equal amounts of this epoxy, or whatever you want to call it, moldable epoxy, and mix those together thoroughly, and then I'm going to just sculpt an extension here over this steel plate, and probably put some over the rivet and screw head on the bottom, and let that set up. And it sets up hard as a rock, and eventually get some paint on it and it'll be good as new. Okay, so I've got that with the aid of a X-Acto knife and a little plastic spatula type deal. I've got that molded on there the way I want it. I've covered up the rivet and the screw head. And this stuff is sandable, so I can still do a little bit of smoothing out once it's set up. But other than the rivet here to the rear, even the color is almost already a perfect match. I may not even have to paint it. But that's going to be a good, solid, workable repair that I would have no issue with using, and I wouldn't have any worries about it breaking, unless you're going out shark fishing or something like that. But that's not going to be the case for this reel. Okay, this thing has had an opportunity to at least set up. It's not fully cured yet, but it's not something I need to worry about with regard to messing it up as we go ahead with the service on this. Must be a relatively rare reel, at least the Hawthorne version, the Monkey Words version, because I couldn't find a single picture of one online. So the cap unscrews. There's a knob here to take off the spinner head, and the spinner head has a standard pickup pin. I don't see any cuts at all on the spinner head, so that's good. There's a clip here, and I assume that will allow what appears to be, I guess that's an aluminum spool, painted aluminum, and off comes the clip, and there's the aluminum spool. Alright, so that's all there is to the front end of the thing. And so we'll move on to, let's see. Let's see if I need to, I don't think I would need to take out that screw that holds the button, because this whole rear plastic cap comes off as one piece, so I think I just need to pry it away from the body. So there's the rear cover and the button, which appears to be broken. I don't know if it's going to affect the functioning of the thing, but if you look right there, you can see that this side should look the same as this side, and you can see there's a big triangular piece missing from there. But it doesn't seem to be affecting the functioning, so I'm just going to be really careful and not monkey with that. It's something that I could fix if I needed to, but I don't think I need to yet. So I'm going to leave that and put that in the parts tray. Oh wow, that's really interesting. I have not seen a design like that before. So we have a cast iron removable piece here. So by removing these two screws, it allows you to remove that piece and thus remove, presumably, the pinion gear and axillary shaft. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. I'm just wondering. Yeah, so as you're taking that off, you're going to have to be careful and not let that spring pop off of there, because that spring is held tight up against that. And then just gently let that out. Okay, it looks like it's got an E-clip anyway, so you don't have to worry about that flying off, presumably. Is it an E-clip, or what kind of clip is it? Let's see here. Okay, yeah, so it does have an E-clip. So this sort of brass colored thing right there. So I'm gonna hold that spring down with my thumb and then grab hold of that E-clip with the pliers and pull that out, and then gently let the spring come up. And now you can push the axle shaft on through, and hopefully get the pinion gear out of there. Alright, now to take apart the drag stack. And you have to be really careful. There's a little plastic quote-unquote jewel on there, and mine's already cracked a little bit. But I think you have to, might help to tighten the drag all the way down, but you're going to have to get in there and take that nut off of there and hopefully not damage that little jewel in the process. Problem is I don't know if I can get a socket that is going to fit down in there. There's really not much place to get a grip on the thing. It's sort of, the nut is sort of sunken down in there. I'm going to try these are like wire cutters or snips, and I think I can bite onto that thing well enough to get it to turn without buggering anything up. But I don't know if they required a special tool for you to remove that or what. But a regular socket and a regular wrench just is not fitting in underneath there, or in between that space. Alright, so there's that. Now, I would think that I can simply unscrew the drag adjustment knob, and then underneath there's a tension washer with the concave side facing out. There is, let's see here, looks like the whole shaft will come out without having to even take off this nut. I'm sure that's going to have to come off eventually, but the whole nut is moving there, and I mean the whole shaft is moving. Just go ahead and remove that. Alright, there's some kind of a spring going on in here, so gonna have to be careful. So we've got a main gear and a main gear shaft, and immediately inside the main gear is a keyed washer. So I'm going to set that there like that for now. Then we have what looks to be a Teflon washer that goes basically right up against the back side of the main gear. And then yeah, there's definitely a spring in there. Let's see. Assume this is some kind of anti-reverse. And then the spring is held on by a screw here. And then there's this little, some kind of a little clicker here that fit in there like that. A little spring or something. Okay, so I gotta remember that this is the screw for that. And then, kind of looks like that bushing should come out, but I don't know if it does. It sticks out from the housing a bit, but I don't know if that's really made to come out or not. I don't think it needs to if it is. So there's the frame. And so I'm going to take all of these parts over to the sink and get them cleaned and scrubbed, in some cases using WD-40 to get down into all the various orifices and journals and things like that. Cotton swab, Dawn dishwashing detergent, toothbrush, and the works. And I'll be back just like that. Alright, let's get these parts spread out here. Alright, and start reassembling the main gear shaft and drag stack. I think it would be better to screw in this piece before you put any of that other stuff in. Screw in the spring. Come on, I'm just not very dexterous today for some reason. Alright. Okay, so once you get that screwed on there, and you want to be careful not to let this spring slide off of that piece, because it's a pain to get back on there. Not impossible, but not fun. Then we have to get our little spring set in there that operates the drag clicker. And then we can put on the drag clicker. And we also want to make sure before we put this piece on, this secondary shaft, if you will, that we oil that and drop that down in there. And the spring is going to kind of want to keep it off the center till you get this down inside the bushing. Once that's in there, that'll line everything up. And you have to kind of twist this until it falls into place. Now, you want to make sure you don't get any oil on the face there where the drag washer, the Teflon drag washer, is going to go. Then you can add your main gear, and you kind of got to slip the anti-reverse pawl up underneath there because it's guided by that spring, and then key in the shaft there, and then put your handle on, and that's keyed, so it's kind of D-shaped. Let's get that on there, and you want to keep holding all this because it's not going to stay entirely together until you've got your drag adjuster knob on there. Whoops. Got to have our tension washer first. Concave side facing out. Then we can add that. And then we can put our little nut back on. And again, it's one of those situations where you can tighten it down so far, and then you're down inside the drag adjuster knob, and you can't tighten it any further without, because I can't get a socket down in there, and you can't tighten it any further without special tactics. Okay, now we can oil the axle shaft, and we can put a little grease right in here where that axle or that pinion gear rides, and we can kind of stick that back into place there and run this up through. And that's got a kind of a D-shaped key, so just twist until it goes in. And then we can reinstall our spring. We can push that down past, let's see here, I want to get this twisted just right so it's ready to take that, so it's in the right position to install that E-clip. So now I'm going to get the E-clip and pop that into place, and now we can do some greasing of the gears. Okay, now we can reinstall this support here for the axillary shaft. We can put a little bit of grease on the end of the button, and we can, I think, at this point, go ahead and put the rear cover in place. And then on the spool, find the little punch out there, and that should line up. So that way you know that's the bottom of the spool, and that should line up with that little bump there. until it more or less locks in place. Then you install the clip to hold it into place. Then you have your spinner head, and that needs to have a little bit of lubrication so that that piece of nylon slides freely on there, and maybe a little bit on the pin itself where it kind of runs into the housing there. And then this has a D-shaped key on it, so that fits on there like that, and it's got a rather convenient finger screw to hold it in place. Now, this is one thing I was concerned about. I don't know, the drag is not engaging properly. So when I hold that spinner head, I should have drag, and I've got the drag completely off. So after doing a little bit more research on this reel, I've determined that this is not a Johnson 130A, but rather a Johnson 130, the first version before the A and B. And the reason for that is that the Johnson A and B, the successors to the regular 130, had oscillating spools that basically had a level wind feature, which this one does not have. But one of the unique features of the 130s, and I assume both the 130A and 130B also had this, in addition to them having an oscillating spool, is that it had a quote-unquote automatic transmission. So when I first reassembled it and tried to check the drag, normally I can just hold on to the spinner head if it's a drag that's in the main gear and just crank, you know. But this one, it's not, the drag isn't working, and that's because in this case, whenever you're winding forward on this reel, you are engaged in direct drive. If the fish starts to really fight and so on, and you need drag, so if I'm winding forward like this and I try to turn this back a different direction, the drag doesn't engage. But if I'm fighting a fish and I turn the handle back just that far, and I'll leave it in that position, and then I try to turn this, oh, come on. Now I've got drag. But if I'm going forward and I have that locked in forward, I don't get any drag. So as long as you're winding forward, you have direct drive. Fish starts to fight and you need to give him some drag, cock that back, and the fish can take line without obviously free spooling. You'll be using the regular drag, and then when you go forward again, you're back in direct drive. So that's kind of a nifty feature that I hadn't encountered before. So so that being a Johnson 130 trade reel for Montgomery wards, and thus bearing the Hawthorne name, that puts it into a much narrower time frame assuming that the Hawthorne version was the same years as the Johnson 130 version, which is between 1960 and 1962, which makes them a rarer reel altogether, and probably makes the Montgomery Ward version particularly rare. So now all that there is left to do is to put this cantankerous cap back on there, run a little bit of oil into the knob on the crank handle, spin that around, wipe off all the black gunk coming out of there, and there she is, a fully serviced and repaired, what is essentially a Johnson 130A, but made for Montgomery Wards and thus a Hawthorne Article 60-6403. Ready to go fishing again. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.